Jonathan Harris sat in his spacious, empty office, the lights of the city twinkling outside his tall windows. The room, though elegant, felt cold and sterile. The large desk in front of him was cluttered with paperwork and documents, a stark contrast to the personal warmth of a home. The leather chair he sat in creaked slightly as he leaned back, staring at the pile of emails on his computer screen. The clock on the wall ticked away as the minutes passed, yet nothing seemed to break the quiet. It was his birthday, but you wouldn't have known it. His assistant, Sarah, had left early, having wished him a happy birthday in passing but with the usual rushed tone. The rest of the office was as busy as ever, everyone wrapped up in their own lives and tasks. Jonathan understood. They had their own deadlines to meet, their own pressures. He hadn't expected anyone to make a big deal of it. But still, the emptiness of it all felt sharper today. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed, glancing at the small stack of gifts on the corner of his desk. They were from the company's senior staff: a fancy bottle of wine, a few gourmet chocolates, and a framed photo of the team. He had smiled politely when they handed them to him earlier that day, but now they felt like nothing more than tokens of obligation. He didn't even remember half of their names. The truth was, he didn't know how to connect with people anymore. His days were filled with meetings and phone calls, and his nights were just as busy, filled with reports, plans, and strategies. There was no room for friends, no room for family. Jonathan thought back to the last time he celebrated his birthday properly. It had been years. His wife, Rebecca, had been there then before the divorce. Before everything changed. He remembered the laughter, the music, the warmth of being surrounded by people who cared. But that was long ago. Now, birthdays were just another day, another reminder that success and wealth could never replace the real connections people craved. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the bustling streets below. The city was alive, full of energy, full of people who were living their own stories, completely unaware of his existence. It made him feel small, like a forgotten man. There was no one waiting for him at home. No one would greet him with a smile or ask how his day had gone. The idea of spending another evening alone in his apartment, eating a frozen dinner in front of the TV, felt suffocating. His phone buzzed on the desk, and he quickly picked it up, hoping for some kind of distraction. It was a message from his mother wishing him a happy birthday. He smiled faintly, appreciating the gesture, but it was a quick message, nothing more. She lived across the country, and they rarely spoke beyond the occasional holiday card or birthday wish. His work had pulled him too far away from her, from everything that mattered. He tapped out a quick reply, "Thanks, Mom. Hope you're doing well." He didn't feel like talking more. It was always the same conversation. As the hours passed, Jonathan couldn't help but feel the weight of his choices. He had built an empire, climbed the corporate ladder, and achieved everything he had set out to do. But at what cost? The deeper he climbed, the more distant everyone became. Friends drifted away, and relationships fell apart. Even his own children seemed like strangers to him now. He didn't know how to fix it. He didn't even know where to begin. The soft sound of footsteps echoed outside his office door. Jonathan turned, expecting to see Sarah, the receptionist, or one of his assistants, coming to remind him of some task he had forgotten. But when the door opened, it wasn't any of them. A little girl, no older than 8 or 9, walked into the room. She was carrying a small, colorful plate in her hands. Her hair was in 2 neat braids, and her bright eyes shone with innocence. Jonathan stared at her, completely caught off guard. Can I help you?" he asked, trying to mask his confusion. The girl smiled shyly and stepped forward, holding out the plate toward him. "I saved you some cake, mister." Jonathan blinked, his brow furrowing. "Cake? What do you mean?" The little girl nodded earnestly. It's my birthday today, too, so I had some cake with my family. But I thought maybe you'd want some. I saved you a slice. Jonathan looked down at the plate. There, in the center, was a small piece of chocolate cake, decorated with sprinkles and frosting. It was simple, homemade, but it felt like a strange gift, a gesture from someone so young, yet so thoughtful. He was about to politely decline when he realized something. The office had been filled with reminders of his birthday all day, emails, messages, gifts from colleagues. But this was different. This wasn't out of obligation. It wasn't because of some company policy or societal expectation. This little girl had brought him cake because she thought of him. Because she saw him sitting alone, just like she probably felt when her own birthday was being celebrated. Jonathan hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. He had no idea why she was here or how she even knew about his birthday, but there was something about the simplicity of the moment that touched him deeply. No one had thought of him this way in years. Without saying anything more, he took the plate from her, his fingers brushing against hers. "Thank you," he said, his voice quieter than usual, almost as if the words held more meaning than he had intended. The little girl beamed. "You're welcome. I thought you might like it. It's chocolate cake. My mom says it's the best." Jonathan smiled back, a real smile this time. The kind that hadn't appeared on his face in what felt like forever. It wasn't just the cake, it was the fact that someone had cared enough to do this for him. That someone, a stranger, had noticed his loneliness and taken the time to make him feel less invisible. It wasn't much, but to him, it felt like a moment of hope. The girl turned to leave but stopped at the door. She looked back at him one last time, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you gonna eat it? I hope you like it." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I will. It looks delicious." The girl smiled again, a wide, innocent grin that seemed to brighten the entire room. Then, without another word, she left, closing the door quietly behind her. Jonathan sat down at his desk, staring at the cake in front of him. It was just a small slice, but it felt like the most meaningful gift he had received in years. For the first time that day, he felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. A connection. He slowly picked up the fork and took a bite of the cake. The chocolate was rich, sweet, and comforting. It was simple, yet it felt like the most indulgent thing in the world. As he chewed, Jonathan allowed himself to relax for the first time in hours. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the sweetness, the warmth, and the unexpected kindness of a little girl who had seen beyond his title, beyond his wealth, and had simply chosen to offer a piece of cake. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel so alone. The next few days felt different. Jonathan's office no longer seemed as cold, as empty. Every morning, he arrived to the familiar sounds of the bustling city, the distant hum of traffic, and the quiet murmur of his assistants working at their desks. But now, every time he walked into the building, he thought of Lily. He had no idea how she had known about his birthday, but the memory of her simple, heartfelt gesture lingered. It wasn't just the cake. It was the way she had looked at him, not as the powerful CEO, not as a figure of authority, but as someone who might be lonely, someone who could use a little kindness. He found himself thinking about her more than he cared to admit. Who was this little girl who had so unexpectedly broken through the walls he had built around himself? His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was another message from his mother, this time a video call request. Jonathan hesitated for a moment before he answered, putting on a smile as he looked at the screen. "Happy birthday again, John. I hope you had a good day." His mother's voice was warm, but he could hear the same sense of distance in her words. The long pause between their conversations was always there, no matter how hard they tried to catch up. Jonathan nodded, his smile faltering slightly. "Yeah, thanks, Mom." It was all right. Just another day. He didn't want to go into it, didn't want to explain how lonely he had felt. Instead, he quickly changed the subject, asking about her latest gardening project and what the weather was like in her part of the country. They chatted for a few more minutes before ending the call. Jonathan sat back in his chair, the weight of his thoughts pressing in on him again. As much as he loved his mother, the conversation felt empty. He wasn't angry with her, he knew she had her own life to live. But somewhere along the way, the bonds that had once been strong had frayed, and now they were nothing more than polite exchanges, nothing more than formalities. He longed for something real, something deeper. That afternoon, as Jonathan sat at his desk, reading through a report, he heard a familiar sound, the soft tap of footsteps outside his office door. He looked up just as the door opened, and there she was again, Lily, holding the same small plate, the same shy smile on her face. "Hi, Mr. Jonathan," she said, her voice bright and eager. "I saved you some more cake." Jonathan blinked in surprise, unsure of what to say. He hadn't expected to see her again, but there she was, looking at him like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a moment, he just stared at her, trying to make sense of the situation. Lily stepped into the office, her tiny shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. She held out the plate to him, this time with a new slice of cake, decorated with colorful sprinkles and icing. It looked even better than the first one. "I made it myself," Lily said proudly, her eyes shining with excitement. "My mom let me help this time." Jonathan felt a warm smile tug at the corners of his mouth. He had forgotten how it felt to be around someone who wasn't looking for something from him, someone who wasn't trying to impress or impress upon him their own agenda. Lily was just here. She didn't expect anything from him. She simply wanted to share a moment, to offer a piece of happiness. "Thank you, Lily," Jonathan said, his voice softening as he took the plate from her. "You didn't have to bring me more cake. But I'm glad you did." Lily's grin widened, and she took a seat in the chair across from him. She didn't seem nervous or uncomfortable. It was as if she had known him forever, as if they were old friends catching up. Jonathan felt a strange sense of ease wash over him. It was so unexpected, this little girl bringing him joy when he had thought he was beyond it. "Do you want to hear something funny?" Lily asked, her voice full of curiosity. Jonathan chuckled lightly, nodding. "Of course." "Well," she began, leaning forward as though she were about to reveal a great secret, "I wasn't supposed to come back today. Mom said I had to finish my homework first. But I really wanted to bring you some cake, so I snuck out of the house when she wasn't looking. Don't tell her, though. It's our secret." Jonathan couldn't help but laugh. "Your secret is safe with me," he said, his smile genuine. Lily leaned back in her chair, satisfied. She seemed completely at ease in his office, as though the space, with its polished furniture and expensive decor, was just another room. It made Jonathan wonder when the last time had been that he had felt comfortable in his own skin, in his own surroundings. His office had once been a place of power, a place that demanded respect. But now, in Lily's presence, it felt almost empty. She wasn't impressed by the shiny furniture or the expensive decor. She was just here for the cake. Just here for the moment. "You know, Mr. Jonathan," Lily said after a few moments of silence, "I think you look sad sometimes." Jonathan froze. He wasn't sure how to respond. A child, barely more than a stranger to him, had seen through the walls he had so carefully built. She had noticed something he had tried to hide from everyone, including himself. "I don't mean to be rude," Lily added quickly, her voice small now. I can tell you don't smile a lot. My mom says when you smile, it makes other people happy." Jonathan stared at her, unsure of what to say. His mind raced, trying to process the innocence of her words, trying to make sense of how this little girl had somehow broken through the defenses he had put up over the years. He had spent so much of his life focused on his work, on his career, on his image, forgetting what it was like to be truly happy, to simply enjoy the moment. "You're right, Lily," he finally said, his voice softer than usual. "I haven't been smiling much lately. I guess I've just been too focused on work, on trying to get everything perfect." Lily nodded, as if she understood. "You don't have to be perfect, Mr. Jonathan. You just have to be happy. Like how you were when you ate my cake." "You smiled then?" Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the stirrings of something inside him that he hadn't felt in years, something he couldn't quite name. It was a strange mixture of gratitude, regret, and longing. He took a deep breath and smiled again. This time, it wasn't a polite, forced smile. It was a real one. A smile that came from somewhere deep inside. "Thank you, Lily," he said quietly. "You've made my day better than I could have imagined." Lily beamed at him, her eyes full of warmth and joy. "That's what friends do," she said simply. Jonathan sat back in his chair, feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't known he needed. For the first time in a long while, he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than work and achievement. Maybe, just maybe, he needed to start living again, not for the next deal, not for the next promotion, but for the simple joys in life like cake, and smiles, and friendship. As Lily finished her cake and stood to leave, she gave him one last look, her eyes sparkling with the innocence of youth. "I'll see you again, Mr. Jonathan," she said with a wave. "Maybe next time, we can have cake together." Jonathan smiled warmly, watching her leave the room with a sense of wonder. Something inside him had changed, something he couldn't yet fully understand. But for the first time in years, he felt hopeful. The emptiness in his office no longer felt so heavy. The days that followed were strange for Jonathan. There was something about Lily's visit that lingered with him, something that he couldn't shake off. Every time he walked into his office, he felt the weight of her words. He hadn't smiled in years, hadn't thought about what really made him happy. He had been too caught up in the world he had built, this high-powered, successful world that had promised everything but had given him nothing but loneliness in return. Lily's words had cracked through that wall, breaking through the emptiness he had grown so used to. Maybe it wasn't too late for him to change, to let go of the constant pressure of work and start living again. He didn't have all the answers, but the thought of reconnecting with something real, something beyond his office walls, had begun to feel more important than anything else. It was a week later when Lily showed up again, this time holding a small, hand-drawn card. Jonathan was in the middle of an important phone call when she entered, but the sight of her immediately made him smile. She stood there, waiting patiently for him to finish, the card held tightly in her small hands. He quickly wrapped up the call, his mind already on her. "What's this, Lily?" he asked as he set the phone down, his voice warm with curiosity. "I made this for you," Lily said shyly, stepping closer to hand him the card. "It's for your birthday. I wanted to say thank you for eating my cake last time. It made me happy." Jonathan chuckled softly as he took the card from her hands. It was a simple drawing, a picture of a big, smiling sun with two stick figures beneath it, one tall and one small. Above them, in crayon, she had written, "You're my friend." It was nothing spectacular, just a child's drawing, but to Jonathan, it meant the world. The words "You're my friend" held so much more weight than anything he had received in years. It was genuine, untainted by expectation or obligation. It was just, real. "Thank you, Lily," Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is beautiful." Lily's eyes lit up as she watched him carefully examine the card. "I wanted to make sure you didn't forget about me. And I thought maybe you could put it on your desk. That way, Whenever you feel lonely, you'll know that you have a friend. Jonathan's heart squeezed in his chest. He had never realized how badly he needed someone to see him, to remind him that he wasn't invisible. It was easy to forget, in the whirlwind of his daily grind, that people still cared about the small things, the things that mattered most. "I'll put it right here," he said, placing the card on his desk, carefully positioning it next to the small plate of leftover cake from the day before. "I think it's going to be my favorite part of the office." Lily smiled, clearly pleased with his reaction. "I'm glad. I wanted to make you happy." For a moment, there was silence between them, but it was a comfortable silence. The kind that spoke louder than any words could. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. There was something about Lily's presence that felt different from anyone else. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to get anything from him. She just wanted to share moments of kindness, and that was more than enough. "You know," Jonathan began, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day. About smiling." Lily tilted her head curiously. "What about it?" Jonathan smiled faintly, a smile that was beginning to feel less forced. "I've spent so many years focusing on work, on making everything perfect, that I forgot what it was like to really smile. To enjoy the simple things." Lily nodded solemnly, as though she understood more than a child her age should. "My mom says that when you smile, people feel happy too. It's like you're giving them a little piece of sunshine." Jonathan chuckled at her words. "That's a good way to put it." Lily's expression grew more serious. "You can't be all about work all the time. You have to take breaks. Or you'll get tired and sad. My mom says you have to do things that make you happy, like playing, or spending time with friends. Or eating cake." Jonathan smiled, grateful for her simplicity. "You're right," he said, his voice soft. "I've been so focused on all the things I thought I needed to do that I forgot how to just be." Lily's eyes sparkled. "I think you just need more cake," she said matter-of-factly. "Cake makes everything better." Jonathan laughed, the sound coming more easily now. "I think you're onto something." As they sat there, chatting about school, friends, and the small wonders of childhood, Jonathan realized that he hadn't felt this at peace in a long time. It wasn't just the cake. It wasn't just the little card or Lily's innocent words. It was something much more profound. For the first time in a long time, Jonathan was truly present in the moment. He wasn't thinking about the next meeting or the next deadline. He was simply enjoying the conversation, enjoying the warmth that Lily had brought into his office. When Lily stood up to leave, Jonathan couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because, in those few moments, he had experienced something he hadn't felt in so long: genuine connection. The kind of connection that didn't require perfection, didn't need to be earned, and didn't come with strings attached. Lily looked up at him with her bright eyes and gave him a little wave. "I'll bring more cake next time. I'll even bring frosting this time. Maybe pink frosting. What do you think?" Jonathan smiled, genuinely this time. "I think that sounds perfect." As she left the room, Jonathan sat back in his chair, the card still on his desk and the plate of cake by his side. He looked out the window at the city below, but this time, it didn't seem so distant, so cold. He wasn't alone anymore. In those simple moments, with the laughter of a child and the sweetness of cake, Jonathan had begun to rediscover something he had forgotten: what it meant to truly live. He looked at the card again, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. Instead, he felt lighter, freer. And he realized that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to make a change. To start smiling again. To start living. The next few weeks unfolded differently for Jonathan. What had begun as a simple gesture, a slice of cake from a little girl, had grown into something more profound. Lily's visits became a regular part of his routine. Every few days, she would appear at his office door, a plate of cake or a hand-drawn card in her hands, and her presence would brighten his day in a way he never expected. She had become a reminder of something he had long forgotten, the joy of small, meaningful moments. Jonathan found himself looking forward to those moments. The once lonely, sterile office now felt alive with her energy. Her innocent questions, her endless curiosity, and her unfiltered way of seeing the world had a calming effect on him. It was as if, with every conversation, she helped him strip away the layers of stress, responsibility, and perfection that had defined his life for so long. In her presence, he could simply be. There was no need for pretense, no need for constant performance. And slowly, Jonathan began to change. It wasn't something that happened overnight, but it was clear to him that his perspective on life was shifting. For the first time in years, he started to see things through a different lens. The constant rush to meet deadlines, the endless focus on building his empire, none of it seemed as important anymore. One afternoon, as he sat at his desk, a thought crossed his mind. The more he reflected on it, the more he realized how true it was. He had spent so much of his life chasing after things that didn't bring him true happiness. Success, recognition, wealth, they had all come at a price. The price had been his peace of mind, his relationships, his happiness. Lily's simple advice, "You have to do things that make you happy," rang in his ears. She was right. She didn't have to say much for him to understand. Her wisdom came not from years of experience or corporate knowledge, but from the untainted clarity of a child who hadn't yet learned the harsh realities of the world. She reminded him that happiness didn't need to be earned or fought for. It could be found in the small moments, in the things that didn't cost anything. Jonathan had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, so obsessed with proving his worth to everyone around him, that he had lost sight of the things that truly mattered. He hadn't spent enough time with his children. He hadn't made any real friends in years. He had buried himself in work, telling himself it was for the greater good, for his future, for his family. But in doing so, he had pushed them all away. That night, Jonathan sat in his apartment, looking out the window at the city lights. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of longing. He missed his children. He missed the days when they would come to him with their small problems and big dreams, when they would ask for his advice or simply want to spend time with him. He missed the simple conversations, the laughter, and the love that had once filled his life. He picked up his phone and stared at the screen. His children's names were there, waiting to be dialed. It had been so long since he had spoken to them, and the thought of reconnecting made his heart ache. What had he been waiting for? Another promotion? More success? He knew he couldn't get back the time he had lost, but maybe he could start rebuilding the bridges he had burned. Jonathan dialed his son's number. After a few rings, the line clicked, and he heard the familiar voice of his son, Alex, on the other end. "Dad? Is everything okay?" Jonathan swallowed hard. The words didn't come easily, but he knew he had to say them. "Hey, Alex. It's been a while, hasn't it?" There was a pause on the other end, and Jonathan could almost hear the surprise in his son's voice. "Yeah, it has. Are you all right?" Jonathan took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've been so focused on work, on building my career, that I've missed out on being there for you. For all of you. And I'm sorry." Another pause. Jonathan could hear the faint sound of Alex shuffling, probably trying to process what his father was saying. "Dad, you don't have to apologize. We know how hard you work. But, we miss you. I miss you." Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat. "I miss you too, son. More than you know." They talked for a little while longer, exchanging stories about their lives, their work, and their own struggles. It wasn't the same as it had been before, But it was a start. A start that Jonathan hadn't known he needed. The next day, Jonathan took another step toward the changes he had been thinking about. He made a call to his ex-wife, Rebecca. They hadn't spoken much since their divorce, and there had been a lot of hurt on both sides. But Jonathan realized that if he wanted to rebuild the relationships that mattered, he couldn't avoid the difficult conversations. He couldn't keep hiding behind his work. When Rebecca answered, Jonathan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Rebecca, it's Jonathan." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Jonathan? What is it?" "I just wanted to reach out. I've been doing some thinking, and I've realized how much I've messed up. I've been so focused on my career that I haven't been there for the kids. Or for you. And I'm sorry." Rebecca's voice softened. "Jonathan, it's been a long time. But I appreciate you saying that. The kids, they miss you. We all do." They talked for a while, catching up on old times, sharing memories, and slowly, Jonathan could feel the walls between them starting to crumble. It wasn't going to be easy, but he knew it was a step in the right direction. As the weeks went on, Jonathan made a conscious effort to change. He began prioritizing his family, reaching out to friends he had lost touch with, and taking time to enjoy the things that brought him joy, things he had long neglected. He started taking walks in the park, going to the movies with his children, and simply being present. And then, one day, as Jonathan was sitting in his office, looking out at the city, he realized something. The emptiness he had once felt wasn't there anymore. It had been replaced with something else. Something warm. Something fulfilling. The connections he had been missing, the relationships he had long neglected, were beginning to fill his life again. He thought about Lily and her simple words, "You have to do things that make you happy." She had been right. Happiness wasn't something that came from success or wealth. It came from the moments we shared with others, the love we gave, and the small acts of kindness that made life worth living. Jonathan smiled to himself, knowing that his life had taken a turn. A turn towards something better. Something real. And for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. Jonathan sat at his desk, looking out over the city, but today, something was different. The once familiar view that had always seemed cold and distant now felt alive with potential. The world outside was the same, busy, fast-paced, full of people going about their lives, but Jonathan no longer felt like an outsider to it all. He felt connected, for the first time in years. He had changed, and so had his perspective on life. Lily's words, so simple yet so profound, had made him realize how much he had been missing. It wasn't just about cake or gifts, it was about the way we live. Life wasn't meant to be measured by success or titles, it was meant to be measured by the connections we make, the moments we share, and the happiness we find in the simplest of things. Jonathan had been so focused on climbing the ladder of his career that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. But now, things were different. The phone rang, breaking him from his thoughts. Jonathan picked it up, expecting it to be another business call, but it was Sarah, his assistant. "Mr. Harris, there's a visitor here for you," she said, her voice polite but curious. "She says she's here to see you. A young girl, her name's Lily." Jonathan smiled instantly. His heart lifted at the thought of her. It had been a few days since their last meeting, and even though he had been busy, he hadn't forgotten the warmth she had brought into his life. She was like a ray of sunshine in a world that had once seemed dull to him. "Send her in," Jonathan replied, his voice full of warmth. A few moments later, the door opened, and Lily walked in, as bright and cheerful as ever. She was holding another plate this time, with 2 slices of cake, both topped with what looked like a generous helping of frosting. It was decorated with bright sprinkles, a clear sign that Lily had put a lot of thought and care into it. Jonathan couldn't help but chuckle as she walked up to his desk, her smile wide and her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Hi, Mr. Jonathan," she said enthusiastically. "I made some cake with frosting this time. I thought you might like it better." Jonathan's heart warmed at the sight of her, and without hesitation, he took the plate from her. "Thank you, Lily," he said, genuinely touched. "You didn't have to do this, but I'm so glad you did." Lily beamed up at him. "I wanted to. I made it just for you. My mom says it's good to share when you're happy. And I thought if you ate more cake, you might smile even more." Jonathan laughed softly, his smile genuine. It was amazing how this little girl, with no hidden agenda, could bring so much light into his life. In the past, he would have been too busy to even appreciate such a simple thing, but now, he saw it for what it was: pure kindness. He took a bite of the cake, savoring the sweetness, and nodded appreciatively. "It's perfect, Lily. I really appreciate it." They both sat down at his desk, and for a while, there was nothing but the sound of Jonathan eating the cake and the occasional giggle from Lily as she told him about her day. It wasn't a conversation about business or deadlines, but about life, about little things, about nothing at all, and yet it meant everything. Lily talked about her school, about how she had a new teacher who was really nice, and about her favorite subjects. Jonathan listened with genuine interest, asking questions and enjoying the simplicity of it all. There was something so refreshing about Lily's way of seeing the world. It wasn't clouded by worries or complications. She didn't care about status, or achievements, or money. She just wanted to be happy, to enjoy life, and to share that happiness with others. Jonathan realized that in her innocence, Lily had taught him more than he had ever learned in all his years of corporate training and business deals. She had reminded him of something vital: that happiness is not something you earn or achieve. It's something you create in the moments you spend with others, the love you give, and the connections you make. "So, Lily," Jonathan said after a pause, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about smiling. You were right. I think I've spent too long focused on things that don't matter, and I've forgotten how to just enjoy life." Lily looked up at him, her expression serious for a moment. "It's okay, Mr. Jonathan. Sometimes people forget. But you can always start again. You don't have to be perfect. Just smile when you can, and be happy when you can. That's what matters." Jonathan smiled at her, feeling a warmth in his chest. He had spent so many years chasing perfection, thinking that the next success or the next achievement would bring him happiness. But he now understood that the true measure of success wasn't how much you had, but how much you gave, how much you shared, and how much joy you experienced in the everyday moments. "I'll remember that," Jonathan said, his voice soft. "I'll try to smile more. And I'll definitely try to enjoy the small things, like this cake." Lily giggled, clearly pleased. "Good. Because you deserve to be happy, Mr. Jonathan. Everyone does." The words struck Jonathan deeply. They weren't just kind words from a child, they were a reminder of the simple truth he had forgotten. He didn't need to be the perfect CEO, the perfect businessman, or the perfect father. What he needed to be was someone who was present, someone who showed up for the people who mattered most, and someone who appreciated the little things in life. The cake, the card, the smiles, all of it mattered more than any corporate deal or award. As Lily finished her slice of cake and got ready to leave, she turned to him and said, "I hope you're happy now, Mr. Jonathan. I'll bring you more cake next time if you want." Jonathan chuckled, feeling more content than he had in a long time. "I'm happy, Lily. More than you know. And yes, I'd love to have more cake next time." Lily waved goodbye and skipped out of the office, leaving Jonathan alone once again, but this time, he didn't feel the emptiness that had once weighed so heavily on him. He felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. The change wasn't instant, but it was real. He was beginning to rediscover the joy in life, in the things that mattered, in the people who mattered. As the day went on, Jonathan found himself smiling more than he had in years. It wasn't forced or polite, it was genuine. It was the kind of smile that came from a heart that had begun to open up again. The kind of smile that came from someone who had finally realized that success wasn't about what you accomplished, but about the love you gave, the relationships you nurtured, and the moments of happiness you shared. That evening, when Jonathan returned home, he didn't just sit in front of the TV with a takeout meal. Instead, he called his children. He spent time talking to them, reconnecting with them in ways he hadn't in years. He made plans to spend the weekend with them, to be present, to show them that he was there for them, no matter what. For the first time in a long time, Jonathan felt hopeful. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But he was no longer alone. He had found something more important than work or success. He had found the joy of living, of truly living, and he wasn't going to let it slip away again. And it all started with a little girl, a slice of cake, and the reminder that happiness was found in the simple things.